On the last day of July 1944, a French pilot climbed into an unarmed reconnaissance plane on the island of Corsica to photograph enemy positions over occupied France. He was 44, too old for combat flying, and quietly unfit for it by his own doctor's account. He'd talked his way onto the mission anyway. He never landed. No radio call, no wreckage. For over 50 years, nobody knew what happened to him. He simply went up into the sky and didn't come back down. That pilot was Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, and 4 years before he vanished, he'd already written the ending to his own story. He just didn't know it yet, because in 1943, Saint-Exupéry published a slim little book about a pilot who crashes in the desert and meets a strange, sad boy who claims to have fallen out of the sky from a star from somewhere very far away. That book was TheLittlePrince, and by the end of this video, I don't think you'll be able to look at it as a kid's book ever again. You've probably seen this book somewhere. The little boy on a tiny planet, drawn in soft watercolor. Maybe you read it in school and never opened it again. Here's what's strange. It's one of the best-selling books ever published, well over 100 million copies, and reportedly one of the most translated books on Earth, trailing only religious texts. And almost none of the adults who own a copy have understood what it's actually saying to them. Because Saint-Exupéry didn't write it for children. He wrote it for the adults those children turn into. As a warning, let's talk about why. The story opens with a narrator, a pilot, who crashes in the Sahara alone, with about a week's worth of water. Out of nowhere, a small boy appears and asks him, completely seriously, to draw him a sheep. That detail isn't random. The narrator tells us that as a child, he once drew a boa constrictor that had swallowed an elephant. To him, it was obvious. Every adult he showed it to just saw a hat, so he stopped drawing, gave up on being understood, and became a serious, respectable adult. The kind who talks to other adults about golf and neckties. The Little Prince is the first person in years to look at his drawing and actually see what's there. That's the whole book in miniature. It was never really about a boy from outer space. It's about the quiet tragedy of growing up and forgetting how to see. The prince tells the narrator about his home, a planet so small he could watch the sunset over and over just by moving his chair a few feet. He mentions the baobab trees that, left unchecked, would grow so large they'd split his tiny planet in half. It's Saint-Exupéry's blunt little metaphor for the small bad habits we let grow because we never dealt with them early. But mostly, he talks about his rose. One day, a single rose grew on his planet, vain, dramatic, endlessly demanding. She told him she wasn't afraid of tigers, then immediately admitted she was terrified of drafts. He watered her, sheltered her, listened to her complaints, and eventually, worn out, he left. He became a wanderer between planets. It's only much later that he understands what he actually had. And he gets there through a fox. On Earth, in a garden, the prince finds something that breaks his heart before it heals it. 5,000 roses, identical to his. His rose wasn't unique at all. That's when a fox asks to be tamed. The fox explains it simply. Right now, you're just a boy like 100,000 others to me. I don't need you, you don't need me. But if we build something, if you tame me, we'll need each other. You'll be the only one like you in all the world to me. Then the fox hands the prince, and Saint-Exupéry hands the audience the actual thesis of the book. What is essential is invisible to the eye. Suddenly, the prince understands his rose. She wasn't special because of her petals. Nothing measurable made her unique. She was his because of the time he'd spent on her, the watering, the complaints he'd put up with, the glass dome he'd built to keep the wind off her. It was never about the flower. It was about the relationship. And here's the line that's very hard to unhear once you've read it. You become responsible forever for what you have tamed. Before Earth, the prince visits 6 tiny planets, each with exactly 1 adult on it. 6 small, brutal caricatures of how grown-ups waste their lives. A king with no subjects who rules anyway, timing his one order to whenever the thing was already about to happen. A vain man who lives for applause and can't hear anything else. A drunkard, drinking to forget the shame of drinking. A businessman who spends his life counting the stars because, to him, owning something just means putting a number on it. He's never once looked up at them. A lamplighter, obeying an outdated order on a planet that now spins so fast a day lasts 1 minute. He's the only adult the prince actually respects, because his work is about something beyond himself, and a geographer who studies the whole universe from a desk and has never gone outside to see any of it. Power without purpose. Fame without connection. Addiction. Wealth as a number instead of an experience. Duty without meaning. Knowledge with no lived experience behind it. 6 ways of being asleep. Back on Earth, the prince tells the narrator something that sounds, at first, like a strange aside. He's arranged with a venomous snake to bite him, so he can shed his body. Too heavy, he says, to carry back to his star and go home. The narrator begs him not to. The prince is gentle but unmoved. It will look like I died, he warns him. Don't come watch. That night he walks out alone. There's a flash of yellow near his ankle in the sand. In the morning, his body is gone. Saint-Exupéry never tells you what actually happened. Did the prince really return to his planet, to his rose, somewhere out among the stars? Or is this simply how a children's book describes a child dying, wrapped in just enough metaphor that a 5-year-old can survive reading it, and an adult can finally cry over it? The book refuses to resolve it. That refusal is the point. The narrator is left looking up every night, unable to know for certain. And the final page, over a plain drawing of an empty desert, asks you, the reader, directly. Write to him immediately if you ever see the little prince come back. And this is where the story stops being just a story. Because a year after publishing a book about a pilot who crashes alone and vanishes without a body, Saint-Exupéry did exactly that. He climbed into a plane and disappeared. No grave, no answer. For over 50 years. The same unbearable non-ending he'd written for his own narrator, staring up, unable to be sure. It wasn't until 1998 that a fisherman off Marseille pulled up a silver bracelet in his net, engraved with Saint-Exupéry's name. It took until 2000 for divers to confirm wreckage from his exact aircraft on the seafloor. To this day, how and why he went down is still debated. Before that final flight, he'd given the original manuscript and watercolor drawings to a friend in New York, with a note suggesting it was really all he had to leave behind. He wrote a story about letting go of someone you love without ever being sure they're truly gone. Then he became that same unresolved absence for the people who loved him. Maybe that's why this children's book quietly wrecks so many adults who come back to it later in life. It was never about a boy from a tiny planet. It's about what happens the moment you stop looking up, about the relationships you become responsible for the second you let yourself care, about the difference between what's expensive and what's essential. Saint-Exupéry spent his whole life flying toward the horizon and never quite came back from it. On the page and then for real. So if you've read The Little Prince, tell me in the comments, what's your rose? What's the thing you've quietly tamed that you're responsible for now? And if you haven't read it yet, maybe don't read it as a bedtime story this time. Read it as the warning he actually meant it to be.